Welcome to English by Mind Training. My name is Sarah, and I am truly happy that you are here today. In the next few minutes, we are going to explore vocabulary that native English speakers use in everyday life. If you want your English to sound more natural, more confident, and more like the way people actually speak in the United States and other English-speaking countries, this episode will help you. Many English learners know grammar and basic vocabulary, but they still feel that their English sounds a little formal or textbook-like. Native speakers often use simple but expressive words and phrases that make conversations sound relaxed and real. Today, I will guide you through those kinds of words while we talk naturally, just like a friendly podcast conversation. Let's start with something important. Native speakers often replace very basic words with more descriptive ones. For example, instead of always saying very good, many people say awesome, great, or amazing. These words add energy and emotion to the conversation. Imagine a friend asks how your day was. Instead of saying it was very good, you might say it was great or it was pretty awesome. Another example is the word tired. Native speakers sometimes say, I am exhausted, I am worn out, or I am drained. Each phrase paints a stronger picture. If you worked all day and studied all night, saying, I am exhausted sounds more natural than simply saying, I am tired. Now, let's talk about everyday reactions. When something surprising happens, Americans often say, no way, seriously? Or you are kidding. These expressions show emotion quickly. If a friend tells you they got a new job, you might respond with, no way, that is amazing. Native speakers also love short, friendly responses. Words like totally, exactly, and absolutely are common in conversations. Imagine someone says, learning English takes practice. You might answer, totally, or exactly. These quick responses show agreement in a natural way. Another common habit is using softening phrases. Instead of speaking too directly, native speakers often add small expressions to sound polite and relaxed. For example, you might hear, I guess, kind of, or a little bit. Someone might say, I'm kind of busy today, or I guess we can try that idea. These phrases make the conversation smoother. Let's move into vocabulary for daily life. Instead of saying, I will think about it, many native speakers say, let me think it over. Instead of saying, I understand, people often say, I get it. The phrase, I get it, is extremely common in American English because it sounds casual and friendly. When something becomes clear, a native speaker might say, that makes sense. For example, if your teacher explains a difficult idea, you could respond by saying, that makes sense now. This shows that the explanation helped you understand. Another phrase you will hear often is figure out. Instead of saying, I will solve this problem, people say, I will figure it out. This phrase appears everywhere in conversations, movies, and podcasts. Now, let's explore vocabulary that shows emotions. If someone feels very happy about something, they might say, I'm thrilled, or I'm so excited. If they feel nervous, they might say, I'm a little anxious. When someone feels calm after stress, they might say, I feel relieved. Native speakers also use phrases to describe interest. Instead of saying something is interesting, people often say, it's fascinating or it's pretty cool. The phrase pretty cool is extremely common in relaxed conversation. Let's talk about encouragement words. If a friend is worried about a challenge, a native speaker might say, you got this. This short phrase means you can do it and I believe in you. Another supportive phrase is keep going. These expressions are simple but powerful. Another useful expression is it depends. Native speakers say this when the answer changes based on the situation. For example, someone might ask what time you wake up. You could say, it depends on my schedule. In conversations, native speakers also like using storytelling phrases. They might say, "Guess what happened?" or "You will not believe this." These phrases build curiosity before sharing a story. Now imagine you are describing a busy day. Instead of saying, "I had many things to do," you could say, "My day was packed." Saying "my schedule was packed" sounds very natural in American English. When someone is extremely busy, they might say, "I'm swamped." This means they have too much work to handle comfortably. Let's talk about learning vocabulary through listening. One of the best ways to sound more like a native speaker is to hear how real conversations flow. Pay attention to the rhythm, the pauses, and the emotion in people's voices. You can also repeat phrases out loud. Repetition trains your brain and your mouth at the same time. When you practice regularly, these expressions start appearing naturally in your speech. Confidence is another important part of sounding natural. Even if your vocabulary is still growing, speaking with calm confidence makes your English sound stronger. Native speakers do not always use complicated words, they simply communicate clearly and naturally. Now let's imagine a short daily conversation. A friend asks how your week is going. You might say, "It has been pretty busy, but things are going well." If they ask about your plans, you could say, "I'm trying to figure out my schedule." Notice how these phrases create a relaxed tone. That's exactly how real conversations sound. Another great habit is learning small transition phrases. Words like actually, basically, and honestly help connect ideas smoothly. For example, you might say, "Honestly, I was a little nervous at first, but now I feel confident." Native speakers also enjoy using positive encouragement in conversations. If someone shares a goal, you might say, "That sounds like a great plan," or "That's a smart idea." These expressions build friendly communication. As you continue learning vocabulary, remember something important. Fluency is not about knowing thousands of difficult words. Fluency is about using the right words naturally at the right time. The more you listen, practice, and speak, the more these expressions will become part of your everyday English. Before we finish, I want to remind you that improving your English is a journey. Every new phrase you learn is a step forward. Be patient with yourself and keep practicing daily. And if you want to keep learning vocabulary that native English speakers really use, make sure you subscribe to this channel. This is English by Mind Training, where we train your mind to think, understand, and speak English more naturally. I am Sarah, and I truly appreciate you spending this time with me today. Keep learning, keep practicing, and keep believing in your progress. I will see you in the next episode. Let me continue with more expressions that native English speakers use every day. A very common phrase is, "Hang on a second." People say this when they need a little time before answering. For example, someone asks you a question and you're thinking. You might say, "Hang on a second while I check." Another useful phrase is, "Give me a minute." It means almost the same thing and sounds very natural in casual conversation. These small expressions make your English sound smoother and more human. Native speakers also use the phrase "it turns out" when they explain something surprising. For example, you might say, "I thought the meeting was today, but it turns out it is tomorrow." You may also hear people say, "to be honest." This phrase introduces a sincere opinion. Someone might say, "To be honest, I was not expecting that result." When people want to express a small problem, they often say, "It is not a big deal." This phrase helps keep conversations relaxed and positive. Another phrase you will hear often is, "by the way." Native speakers use it to introduce a new idea in the middle of a conversation. For example, "By the way, did you finish that project?" Now, let us talk about describing improvement. Instead of saying, "My English is improving," many people say, "My English is getting better." This sounds more natural and conversational. When something becomes easier, you might say, "I'm getting the hang of it." This phrase means you are starting to understand how to do something. Native speakers also use the phrase step by step. It reminds people that learning happens gradually. Another expression is sooner or later. It means something will eventually happen. For example, if you keep practicing, sooner or later you will speak English confidently. You might also hear people say, "at the end of the day." This phrase is used when someone wants to summarize the most important point. Let us continue exploring vocabulary for daily communication. When someone agrees with an idea strongly, they might say, "that sounds perfect." When someone is unsure, they might say, "I'm not quite sure yet." If a plan changes, people often say, "plans changed." This short sentence is very common in casual speech. Native speakers also like using the phrase, "take your time." It means there is no need to hurry. Another encouraging phrase is, "you are doing great." Teachers, friends, and coworkers often say this to motivate someone. Now, let us talk about curiosity expressions. Someone might say, "I was wondering about something." This is a polite way to ask a question. For example, "I was wondering if you had time to talk later." When people remember something suddenly, they say, "that reminds me." It connects one idea to another memory. Vocabulary becomes powerful when you connect it with real situations. Try imagining conversations with friends, teachers, or coworkers. Picture yourself describing your day. You might say, "today was pretty productive, and I finally finished a project I had been working on." Or maybe you say, "today was challenging, but I learned a lot." The goal is not to memorize long lists of words. The goal is to use vocabulary that fits real life. The more you listen to natural English podcasts, the more familiar these expressions will become. Listening helps you notice patterns in speech. You will hear how people begin sentences, how they react, and how they express opinions. Over time, your brain starts recognizing these patterns automatically, and when you start using them yourself, your English begins sounding more natural. Remember that progress happens through consistent practice. Even speaking for a few minutes each day can make a difference. Try describing your emotions, your plans, and your experiences using the vocabulary we discussed. Confidence grows when you practice regularly, and every time you speak, you train your mind to think in English instead of translating from another language. That is one of the main goals of this channel. English by Mind Training focuses on helping you think in English naturally. When your mind becomes comfortable with the language, speaking becomes easier. You will notice that conversations flow more smoothly. You will also understand native speakers more clearly. So, keep listening, keep practicing, and keep exploring new vocabulary. Your English journey is unique and valuable. Every new expression you learn adds another tool to your communication skills. And with patience and dedication, you will sound more and more like a natural English speaker. Thank you again for joining me today. I am Sarah, and this is English by Mind Training. If you enjoy learning vocabulary that native speakers truly use, remember to subscribe and continue learning with us. Your progress starts with daily practice and a curious mind. I look forward to sharing more lessons with you very soon. Keep practicing every day, stay curious about new expressions, and speak with confidence whenever you have the chance. Small steps create big progress over time, and your voice deserves to be heard clearly in English conversations everywhere. Keep learning and growing with Sarah today.